The grass is wet beneath my chest. Morning dew soaking through my flannel shirt, but I don't feel the cold anymore. Haven't felt much of anything for weeks now. Maybe months. I've taken a solid prone position on this Mississippi hillside. My late uncle's Remington 700 in .300 Winchester Magnum is snugged tight into my shoulder pocket. The leather sling wrapped around my left tricep, just like Uncle Ricky taught me all those summers ago. The rifle feels like an extension of my body, an old friend come to help me finish what needs finishing. The view through the Leupold VXIII scope is crystal clear. 4:12 power magnification, and right now I've got it dialed to 10. Perfect for this distance. The rifle's zeroed at 300 yards, and I've personally verified it prints 5-shot groups from the Shilan barrel that can be covered with a teacup at that range. Tight, precise, deadly, 327 yards. I measured it with a laser rangefinder 3 nights ago. The crosshairs rest steady on the pelvis of my target. Crockett County Chief Deputy Sheriff Jimmy Cummins. The man who started everything. The man who made that phone call. The man who handed my niece over to monsters like she was nothing more than trash to be disposed of. He's standing on his back deck right now, facing my direction but not seeing me. Fat Cuban cigar in one hand, glass of what I assume is bourbon in the other. He's wearing a white undershirt and jeans, probably just got home from terrorizing whatever poor soul crossed his path today. Living his life like he didn't destroy someone else's. I want him to suffer before I send him to hell. That's why the first shot won't be fatal. 150 grain .30 caliber bullet traveling at over 3,000 feet per second does catastrophic damage wherever it lands. Put it in the pelvis, and you shatter bone, sever arteries, destroy organs. But you don't die right away. No, you lie there in agony, wondering what happened, feeling your life leak out onto the wooden planks beneath you. Only after he's experienced real pain. Only after he's had time to contemplate his sins. Only then will I send a second shot downrange to end his miserable existence. I take a deep breath, let it out slow, another deep breath, half release, hold. My shooting position is rock steady, the crosshairs don't waver. I'm sure you're wondering what a 40-something farm equipment mechanic and farmer from Alabama is doing perched on a hillside, about to commit murder for the 4th time in a month. It's a long story. A painful one, and it requires considerable background to explain how I came to find myself here, finger resting on a 2.5-pound trigger, fully prepared to end another man's life. My name is Michael Orr, Mickey to my friends and family, and this is how I became a killer. Let me take you back, way back, because you need to understand where I came from to understand where I ended up. I was born a disappointment. Now I don't say that for sympathy, it's just a fact. Like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. My parents were brilliant people. College professors at one of those fancy nationally ranked universities up north. The kind of school where tuition costs more than most folks' houses. They specialized in genetics research, spent their careers studying the origins of cancer at the molecular level. Published papers with titles I couldn't pronounce, let alone understand. They met as undergraduates. Got married after finishing their master's degrees, kept right on going through their PhDs together. By the time they landed tenure-track professorships, they were already considered rising stars in their field. Then came my brother Aaron. Aaron was everything our parents hoped for, brilliant from the jump. Reading by age 3, skipped 2 grades, perfect SAT scores. He followed the family path like it was preordained. College, graduate school, PhD in genetics. Married another genius he met in the lab. Our parents couldn't have been prouder. 15 years after Aaron was born, I showed up. Surprise! My mother was 47 years old. She'd thought her child-rearing days were long behind her. I was the result of a failed birth control mechanism, as she so clinically put it once when she'd had too much wine at Thanksgiving. Not exactly the warm and fuzzy origin story every kid dreams of. And unlike Aaron, I was not a genius. I was a mediocre student at best. C's and the occasional B when a subject actually interested me. My parents tried tutors, tried summer programs, tried stern lectures about living up to my potential. Nothing stuck. The only things that captured my attention were things mechanical. Engines, gears, hydraulics, the beautiful logic of machines. By the time I was 10, I was taking apart everything I could get my hands on. Toasters, lawnmowers. My father's electric razor, which did not go over well. Sometimes I could put them back together. Sometimes I even fixed things that were broken. Most times I just wanted to understand how the parts fit, how the pieces worked in harmony. My parents didn't know what to do with me, but my Uncle Ricky did. Uncle Ricky was my mother's younger brother, and he was about as different from her as a person could be. While she'd gone off to academia, he'd stayed in Alabama. The Black Belt region, they call it, named for the dark, rich soil that made it some of the most fertile farmland in the eastern United States. Uncle Ricky farmed part-time and ran a farm equipment repair business as his primary income. John Deere tractors, Case combines, Kubota loaders. If it had an engine and worked the land, Uncle Ricky could fix it. He was no scholar, barely graduated high school, but the man could diagnose a diesel engine problem by sound alone, could rebuild a transmission blindfolded, and he had patience. Lord, did he have patience. Starting when I was 12, I spent every summer on his farm, best times of my life. Uncle Ricky and Aunt Ruth never had kids of their own. Something about complications early in their marriage that they didn't talk about much. But they treated me like a son from day one. Gave me a room in their old farmhouse. Put me to work alongside Uncle Ricky in the shop. Boy, he'd say, handing me a wrench, school's gonna teach you to think, but I'm gonna teach you to do. And he did. By 14, I could change the oil and filters on any tractor in the county. By 16, I was rebuilding carburetors and adjusting valve clearances. Uncle Ricky never got frustrated when I made mistakes. He'd just hand me the manual, point to the relevant section, and say, "Try again." But it wasn't just mechanics Uncle Ricky taught me. He was an avid outdoorsman, hunted deer every fall, kept a garden that could feed half the county, and he was a crack shot with both rifle and pistol. For years, he competed at the Camp Perry matches run by the NRA, national-level competition. He never finished first, but he was always well up on the roster. Top 20, sometimes top 10. The man could shoot. "Shooting's like anything else," he told me once, adjusting my grip on his .22 rifle. "It's about fundamentals, breath control, trigger squeeze, follow-through. Get the basics right and the rest takes care of itself." My parents hated that he taught me to shoot. Called it barbaric, unnecessary, dangerous. Uncle Ricky just smiled and kept on teaching. We practiced regularly during my summers with him. Started with that .22, moved up to larger calibers as I grew. By the time I was 17, I could outshoot most adults at the local range. Uncle Ricky beamed like I'd won the Nobel Prize. When I graduated high school, everyone expected me to go to college somewhere. Not the prestigious university where my parents taught, of course. I didn't have the grades or the SAT scores for that, but somewhere. Community college, maybe, state school, something. Instead, I enlisted in the Army. You should have seen my mother's face, like I'd told her I was joining the circus. My father just shook his head and walked away. Aaron tried to talk me out of it, but his heart wasn't in it. We'd never been close. 15 years is a big gap, and we'd grown up in different worlds. Uncle Ricky drove 3 hours to see me off at the recruiting station. "Proud of you, boy," he said, shaking my hand. "You're finding your own path, nothing wrong with that." I spent 4 years as a mechanic in an armored division. Humvees, Bradley fighting vehicles, M1 Abrams tanks. If it rolled and carried soldiers, I learned to fix it. The Army has a way of teaching you things fast, sink or swim. I swam. I also kept shooting, made both the post rifle team and pistol team. Competed in military matches across the country, got pretty good. Good enough that my commanding officer once asked if I'd considered sniper school. I hadn't, still don't know why I said no. Maybe things would have turned out different if I'd said yes. Maybe not. When my enlistment ended, I had options. Could have re-upped. Could have gone private contractor, made good money fixing military equipment overseas. Could have finally gone to college on the GI Bill. Instead, I called Uncle Ricky. "Got a job for you if you want it," he said. No hesitation, no questions. "Shop's been busier than I can handle. Could use another pair of hands." I drove to Alabama the day after my discharge. For the next 15 years, that farm was my life. I learned everything Uncle Ricky could teach me, then learned more on my own. Took over managing the business as he got older. Handled the books, the customers, the ordering. Uncle Ricky focused on what he loved, the actual work. The puzzle of a broken machine and the satisfaction of making it run again. We were happy. Simple life, but a good one. Then Aunt Ruth had her heart attack, happened on a Tuesday morning. She was hanging laundry on the line out back and she just dropped. Gone before she hit the ground, the doctors said. Uncle Ricky found her an hour later, sheets tangled around her body like a shroud. He was never the same after that. 6 months later, Uncle Ricky passed in his sleep. The doctors said it was his heart too, but I knew better. He died of grief, of loneliness, of not wanting to live in a world without Ruth. The will was simple. Everything came to me. The business, the house, the 40 acres of farmland, his truck, his tools, and his Remington 700 Deer rifle in .300 Winchester Magnum. That rifle had been his pride and joy. Custom Shiloh barrel, tuned trigger, glass-bedded stock. He'd built it himself over the course of 2 years, piece by piece, component by component, shot his biggest buck with it, took it to Camp Perry 6 times. I inherited that rifle never imagining what I'd eventually use it for. But I think Uncle Ricky would have understood, might even have approved. He always said family was everything. Now let me tell you about my brother Aaron and his family, because that's where Natalie comes in. And Natalie is the reason for everything that happened. Aaron followed our parents' path like he was born to walk it. Undergraduate degree in biology, master's in genetics, PhD from one of those institutions that only accepts 12 people a year. He was smarter than our parents, and they knew it, encouraged it, celebrated every award, every publication, every step up the academic ladder. It was in graduate school that he met Aisha. Aisha Williams was African-American, dark-skinned, with high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to look right through you. She wore her hair natural, a crown of tight curls that she refused to straighten no matter how many academic conferences she attended. Said it was a statement, a reclamation. She was also, by most measures, even more brilliant than Aaron. They met in the lab, competing theories about genetic markers for certain types of leukemia. Aaron thought she was wrong. She thought he was arrogant. 3 months later, they were engaged. My parents had. Mixed feelings. They never said anything outright, never would have, but there were comments. Questions about whether Aaron had considered the challenges, the differences in background, the way certain colleagues might react. Aaron told them politely to mind their own business. Aisha's family had their own history. Her father, James Williams, grew up in Crockett County, Mississippi. This was back in the 50s and 60s, when the civil rights movement was tearing the South apart. Crockett County was a place where 90% of the population was black, but 100% of the power was white. Had been that way since before the Civil War. James Williams tried to change that. He organized voter registration drives, helped his neighbors navigate the impossible literacy tests and poll taxes designed to keep them from the ballot box. He was 23 years old and believed in the promise of America. The Klan disagreed. They came to his house one night, burned a cross on his lawn, left a note saying the next fire would be inside the house with his family in it. His mother begged him to stop. His father said nothing, just stared at the charred remains of the cross with eyes that had seen too much. James and his young wife left Mississippi the next week, headed north to Detroit, where the auto industry was booming and a black man could find work that paid enough to raise a family. They never went back, not once, not even for funerals. Aisha grew up hearing her father's stories, the terror of that night, the shame of leaving, the anger that never quite faded. She channeled it into her work, into proving that she could succeed in spaces that weren't designed for people who looked like her. And succeed she did. While still in graduate school, Aaron and Aisha started a genetics research company. Started it in their apartment, working nights and weekends, running experiments on borrowed equipment. They had a theory about early cancer detection, something about genetic markers that showed up years before tumors formed. The venture capital people got interested. Then the big pharmaceutical companies came sniffing around. 5 years after they founded the company, they sold it for a number with 10 digits in it. I don't know exactly how much ended up in their personal accounts after taxes and investor payouts, but it was enough that money would never be a concern again. A few years after they married, they had Natalie. Children of brilliant parents don't always turn out to be brilliant themselves. I'm living proof of that, but Natalie was something else entirely. She was reading by age 3, not picture books, chapter books. By 5, she'd moved on to her parents' scientific journals asking questions about concepts that most adults couldn't pronounce. Her preschool teachers didn't know what to do with her. She started high school at 11. Graduated at 14, top of her class. College was done before she turned 17. Summa cum laude, double major in biology and chemistry, with enough credits for a minor in philosophy just because she found it interesting. By 21, she had her doctorate in genetics. The dissertation was about something involving CRISPR technology and tumor suppression genes. I read the abstract 3 times and still didn't understand it. She went to work for the same pharmaceutical company that had bought her parents' research. They gave her a lab, a team, and a budget most researchers would kill for. She was on track to change the world. But here's the thing about Natalie that made her special. It wasn't just the intelligence. Plenty of smart people walk this earth. What made Natalie different was her heart. She loved her family fiercely, especially her maternal grandparents. James and Dorothy Williams had retired by the time Natalie came along, and they became her primary caretakers while Aaron and Aisha built their company. She spent more time with them than with her parents, and she adored them for it. Her grandfather's stories fascinated her. The Mississippi of his youth, the terror and the hope and the fight for something better. She would sit at his feet for hours asking questions, taking notes. Where exactly did you live? What were the names of the people who helped you? What happened to the ones who stayed? James told her everything. The good and the bad, the friends he'd lost touch with. The relatives whose graves he'd never visited. The guilt of a man who escaped while others suffered. Natalie developed an obsession with Crockett County. She researched it online, ordered old newspaper clippings through interlibrary loan, even tracked down census records from the 1950s. She wanted to understand her roots, wanted to walk the streets her grandfather had walked. Her parents discouraged it. Her grandparents actively opposed it. Crockett County hadn't changed, they said. The same families still ran things. The same attitudes still festered. A young black woman asking questions about the bad old days would not be welcome. Natalie listened, nodded, and filed the information away for later. None of this would have mattered to me if things had gone differently. Aaron and I weren't close. We talked at holidays, exchanged birthday cards. He was proud of his brilliant daughter, mentioned her occasionally in our brief phone calls. But she was part of his world, not mine. Then came the accident. It was a spring afternoon. Aaron and Aisha were driving to visit her parents for Sunday dinner. Natalie wasn't with them. She'd stayed home to work on a research paper. Thank God. James and Dorothy were in the back seat. The trucker who ran the red light was trying to make time, running behind schedule, desperate to get his load delivered. He blew through the intersection at 50 miles per hour and hit Aaron's sedan broadside. Driver's side, never even hit the brakes. Aaron died on impact, so did Aisha. James held on for 3 hours before his injuries took him. Dorothy was pronounced dead at the scene. 4 people gone in the space of a heartbeat. Natalie was 15 years old and suddenly an orphan. My parents were in their 70s by then. My father had early-stage dementia. My mother had her hands full caring for him. They made it clear without quite saying it outright that taking in a teenager was not something they were prepared to do, even a teenager as brilliant and self-sufficient as Natalie. So I became her legal guardian, me, Mickey Orr, the family disappointment. The mechanic who never finished college. The uncle she'd met maybe a dozen times in her entire life. I also discovered, to my considerable astonishment, that Aaron and Aisha had named me co-trustee of the trusts they'd created for Natalie. Me and the bank's trust department. They must have figured that family should have a voice in their daughter's financial future, and I was the only family likely to outlive them. The bank officer handling the trust was a woman named Patricia Goodman. 50s, silver hair, no-nonsense attitude. She'd been managing accounts for wealthy families for 30 years. When I admitted I had no idea what I was doing, she just nodded. Most people don't. That's why I'm here. You focus on the girl. I'll focus on the money. Between us, we'll make sure she's taken care of. That arrangement suited me fine, but taking care of Natalie meant uprooting my entire life. She was in the middle of her undergraduate program, had her parents' house, her friends, her routines. I couldn't ask her to leave all that and move to rural Alabama. So I went to her. Left the day-to-day management of the business to my senior mechanic, a man named Carl who'd worked for Uncle Ricky before me, leased out the farmland to a neighbor. Packed my clothes and my uncle's rifle into my truck and drove north to move into Aaron and Aisha's house. It was awkward at first. This strange man living in her space, trying to be something like a parent. Natalie was polite but distant, spent most of her time studying or working on research projects that I couldn't begin to understand. We coexisted more than we lived together, but slowly, over months, things changed. I learned to cook meals she actually liked. She started asking me about the farm, about Uncle Ricky, about the parts of her family history that didn't involve Ivy League degrees. We watched movies together on Saturday nights, argued about the endings, laughed at the same stupid jokes. By the time she finished her doctorate 6 years after I'd moved in, we were close. As close as an uncle and niece could be, maybe closer. She called me Uncle Mickey with genuine affection. I called her Kid, even though she had more degrees than most people twice her age. When she bought that Mercedes-AMG GT63 SC with money from her trust, bright red, 600-some horsepower, absolutely impractical, I gave her a hard time about it for weeks. "You know how much that thing costs to maintain?" I asked. She just grinned. "I know a mechanic." When she finally moved out to start her career, I went home to Alabama. Back to the farm, back to the business, back to my simple life. But we talked every week. She came to visit on holidays. The bond we'd built didn't fade with distance. I thought the hard times were behind us. I was wrong. It started with a conversation over Christmas dinner. Natalie had come down to the farm for the holiday like she had every year since I'd moved back. We'd spent the morning cooking together. Ham with brown sugar glaze, sweet potatoes, collard greens, traditional Southern fare that I'd learned from Aunt Ruth and passed on to Natalie, who attacked the recipes with the same intensity she brought to everything else. The meal was good. The wine flowed freely. We were relaxed, content, full of food and holiday cheer. Then Natalie dropped her bomb. "I want to visit Crockett County." I nearly choked on my sweet tea. "Excuse me? Crockett County, Mississippi, where Grandpa James grew up. I want to go there, see it for myself." I set my glass down carefully. "Why?" "Because I need to understand all those stories Grandpa told me. They're just words without context. I want to walk where he walked, talk to people who might have known him. Find out what happened to the friends he left behind." "Natalie, that's not a good idea. You sound like my parents." "Your parents were right. You know what Crockett County is like. Your grandfather barely escaped with his life, and that was 60 years ago. You think things have changed?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. The gesture reminded me so much of Aisha that it hurt. "I've done research. The county still has an all-white government despite being 90% black. Same families have controlled things for generations. If anything, it's gotten worse because now they have to hide it better." "So why the hell would you want to go there?" "Because hiding it doesn't make it go away. Because someone should bear witness." "Because," she trailed off, and I saw something in her eyes, a fire that went beyond academic curiosity. "Because maybe I can help." I rubbed my face with both hands. "Help how?" "I don't know yet. Maybe just by listening to people, documenting their stories, letting them know someone cares about what they've been through." "Natalie, you're a geneticist, not a civil rights activist." "I'm a human being, and those are my people down there, people who have been forgotten, abandoned. I can't just pretend they don't exist." We argued for 2 hours. I pointed out every danger I could think of, the isolation, the hostility, the complete absence of any meaningful law enforcement protection. She countered every objection with logic, with statistics, with that relentless intelligence that made her who she was. She wasn't naive. I'll give her that. She knew the risks. "I'll be careful," she promised. "I'll check in with you every day, stay in public places, keep my head down. I just want to look around, talk to some people, see if any of Grandpa's old neighbors are still alive. A few days, a week at most. And if something goes wrong, then I leave immediately, no heroics." I didn't like it. Every instinct I had screamed that this was a mistake. But Natalie was an adult, 22 years old, a doctoral-level scientist with more degrees than I had fingers. I couldn't lock her in her room, so I negotiated. "Fine," I said finally, "but we're doing this my way." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm putting a GPS tracker in that ridiculous car of yours. Real-time satellite feed to a computer in my office. I want to know exactly where you are at all times." She nodded slowly. "Okay, that's reasonable." And cameras, front and rear dash cams with sensitive microphones, the good kind, not that cheap garbage they sell at truck stops. If anything happens, I want a record. Also reasonable. And if you get stopped for any reason, cop, security guard, random person flagging you down, anything, you flip those cameras on before you roll down your window. Understood? Understood. And you call me every day, morning and evening. If I don't hear from you, I'm coming to get you. She smiled. The same smile she'd given me when I taught her to change a tire at 16, humoring the overprotective uncle. I promise, every day. We spent the rest of the holiday installing the equipment. The GPS tracker went under the driver's seat, hardwired into the car's electrical system. The cameras were mounted on the rear-view mirror and rear deck, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. I walked her through the operation 3 times until she could activate everything in her sleep. She left 2 days after New Year's. I stood in the driveway and watched her pull away. She waved through the window, that red Mercedes gleaming in the winter sun. I waved back. I didn't know it then, but it was the last time I would see my niece whole. She arrived in Crockett County the following day. Called me that evening, voice bright with excitement. It's beautiful here, Uncle Mickey. The land is so flat and green. Reminds me of your farm, actually, but bigger. Everything goes on forever. What about the people? Haven't talked to many yet, just the woman at the motel. She was nice enough. Gave me a look when I said I was here researching family history, but she took my credit card without any trouble. Be careful. I'm always careful. Stop worrying. She spent her first few days at the county records office, digging through property deeds and census records. Found the exact location of her grandfather's old family homestead, just an empty field now. House had burned down in 1968, cause officially listed as electrical fire. Nobody believed it. Then she started reaching out to the community. The older black residents were wary at first. A young woman driving a fancy car, asking questions about the bad old days. Could be a journalist looking to stir up trouble. Could be someone working for the people who liked things just the way they were. But Natalie had her grandfather's name, had copies of his voter registration documents from 1962, had photos of him standing in front of the Mount Zion Baptist Church, arm around a group of men who'd risked everything to exercise their constitutional rights. Doors started opening. She called me every night, voice hushed with wonder. Uncle Mickey, you wouldn't believe what these people have been through, and not just back in the 60s, last year, last month. There's a woman named Bernice whose son was arrested for trespassing on his own property. A man named George whose house was condemned by the county for code violations 2 days after he complained about the road conditions on his street. It's systematic. Organized, and nobody does anything about it because everyone's afraid. Natalie, I know I'm being careful, but somebody has to listen to them. Somebody has to write this down. She stayed longer than planned. A few days became a week. A week became 2. She'd found a purpose beyond her original research, and she couldn't let it go. I watched her GPS tracker every day. Little red dot moving around the county, stopping at houses and churches and community centers. Safe, active, present. Then she started encouraging people to vote. The laws are on their side, she told me one night. Federal voting rights protections, anti-discrimination statutes, everything they need to take back their county government is already in place. They just have to use it. And you're telling them this? I'm sharing information, that's all. Voter registration deadlines, where to find their polling places, how to report intimidation to the Justice Department. Nothing illegal about any of it. She was right. Every word she spoke was protected by the First Amendment. Every action she took was well within her rights as an American citizen. But Crockett County didn't run on law. Crockett County ran on fear. The power structure in Crockett County had been in place for over 150 years. The sheriff's family, the Cummins clan, had controlled local law enforcement since Reconstruction. Great-grandfather, grandfather, father, now son. Each one passing the badge to the next, along with the methods and the mentality that kept the county under their thumb. Sheriff William Cummins was in his 60s now. White hair, pot belly, eyes like chips of flint. He'd inherited more than just the sheriff's position from his father. He'd inherited files, decades of dirt on every white person of consequence in the county. Financial irregularities, affairs, Incidents swept under the rug, enough leverage to ensure that no one with power would ever challenge the established order. His son Jimmy was the chief deputy, groomed from childhood to take over when the old man stepped aside. Younger, harder, meaner. The kind of man who smiled while he hurt people because he genuinely enjoyed it. They had a system for dealing with troublemakers. The white ones got reminded of the files. A quiet word, a meaningful look, and suddenly the troublemaker decided their energies were better spent elsewhere. The black ones got a different treatment, arrests on fabricated charges, fines that could never be paid, houses that caught fire in the night. Cars that developed mysterious mechanical failures on lonely roads, people who just disappeared. Nobody talked about it, nobody reported it. The state police didn't care about some backwater county with more cows than people. The federal authorities had bigger problems. Crockett County was forgotten by everyone except the people who suffered there. And then Natalie showed up. A young black woman in a $200,000 sports car, asking questions about the bad old days and telling people they had rights. Telling them they could vote. Telling them things could change if they just stood together. The reports started filtering back to Sheriff Cummins within days of her arrival. He discussed the situation with Jimmy over bourbon one evening. "Just a girl," the sheriff said, "college-educated type, thinks she's going to save the world. Want me to run her plates, see who she is? Already did, name's Natalie Orr, parents dead, guardian some mechanic in Alabama, trust fund baby playing activist. What do you want to do?" The sheriff swirled his bourbon, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Let her run for a while. See who she talks to, might be useful to know which of our people are getting ideas. And then we remind everyone why they keep their mouths shut." Natalie called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was subdued. "Something's wrong, Uncle Mickey." I sat up straighter in my chair. "What kind of wrong?" "I'm being followed. A truck's been behind me all day. Tan pickup, Mississippi plates. Keeps its distance, but it's always there. Get out right now tonight. I can't just leave. I promised Mrs. Johnson I'd help her fill out her voter registration forms tomorrow. She's 83 years old, can barely see. If I don't help her, who will?" "Natalie, your safety is more important than voter registration. One more day. I'll finish with Mrs. Johnson tomorrow morning and be on the road by noon, I promise." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "Call me the minute you leave. I mean it, the minute." "I will. I love you, Uncle Mickey." "I love you too, kid. Be careful." She hung up. I stared at the GPS tracker on my computer screen. The little red dot was stationary at her motel, safe, for now. I should have gotten in my truck and driven through the night to get her. Should have ignored her protests and dragged her out of that county by force. Should have done 1,000 things differently, but I didn't. And the next call I received wasn't from Natalie. The phone rang at 3:47 in the afternoon. I was elbow-deep in a John Deere transmission at the shop, fighting with a stubborn bearing that didn't want to come out. Carl was working on a hay baler across the garage, country music playing softly from the radio he kept on his workbench. I didn't recognize the number. Jackson, Mississippi area code. Not Natalie's phone. Let it go to voicemail. Figured I'd deal with it later. 10 minutes later it rang again. Same number. Something cold settled in my stomach. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end had a clinical quality to it, professional, detached. "May I please speak to Mr. Orr? You've got him. Are you the Mr. Orr who would be the emergency contact person for a Miss Natalie Orr?" The cold in my stomach turned to ice. "Did something happen to Natalie? I'm sorry, but I must first confirm that you are the contact person for Miss Orr. I'm her uncle and her closest living relative. What happened?" "Thank you, Mr. Orr. I'm calling from the Jackson Municipal Hospital. Miss Orr was medevaced here from Crockett County and is currently in surgery. We need some information from you." Medevaced. Helicopter evacuation. That only happened when someone was too badly hurt to survive an ambulance ride. "What happened to her? Was she in an accident?" A pause, too long. "The nature of her injuries suggests something other than an accident. That's all I'm at liberty to say at this point. Once Miss Orr comes out of surgery, I'm sure the doctor will be able to explain further." Something other than an accident. I knew. Right then, standing in that garage with transmission fluid drying on my hands, I knew. Not the details, not the specifics, but I knew that whatever had happened was deliberate, intentional, the work of human hands. "What do you need from me?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, controlled. Insurance, financial information, medical records. No, sir, we have all of that from the contents of her purse. We just needed to notify a next of kin. Well, I'm notified. I'll be there as soon as possible. If there are any developments while I'm in transit, contact me at this number. Thank you, sir. I'll make a note in the records. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. You call to tell me my niece is in surgery, won't tell me why, and then tell me to have a nice day? What kind of moron are you? There's no need to be rude, sir. Good. I hung up before she could finish. Carl was staring at me from across the garage. He'd turned off the radio. Mickey, what's wrong? My niece is in the hospital, Jackson, Mississippi. I have to go. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded. I've got things here. Go. I called Sam from my truck, already backing out of the lot. Sam Petrosky ran a small charter aviation business out of a private airfield 20 miles from my shop. Couple of Cessnas, a King Air, and more pilot certifications than most people knew existed. We'd met years ago when his plane developed engine trouble and I'd fixed it for him at cost. Mickey. What do you need? Flight to Jackson, Mississippi, right now, as fast as you can manage. He didn't hesitate. Meet me at the field in 30 minutes. I'll have the King Air ready. I broke every speed limit getting there. Sam was waiting on the tarmac, engines already warming up. I climbed aboard without a word and we were airborne within minutes. The flight took less than 2 hours, but it felt like years. I stared out the window at the landscape scrolling by below, green fields, winding rivers, small towns where people lived normal lives, never knowing that somewhere in the sky above them, a man was flying toward the end of everything he cared about. Sam didn't try to make conversation. He knew me well enough to understand that words wouldn't help. We landed at a private airfield outside Jackson just as the sun was setting. I'd arranged an Uber during the flight. The driver was waiting when we touched down. Jackson Municipal Hospital, fast as you can. The driver glanced in his mirror, saw something in my face, and didn't ask questions. He just drove. The hospital was a massive concrete structure, all sharp angles and fluorescent lights. I found the main reception desk and identified myself. Natalie Orr. She was brought in earlier today. I'm her uncle. The receptionist typed something into her computer. Miss Orr is still in surgery. Intensive care unit, 4th floor. Take the elevators to your left and check in at the nurse's station. Still in surgery, after all these hours, I rode the elevator in silence, watching the numbers climb. 2, 3, 4. The doors opened onto a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and desperation. The ICU nurse's station was staffed by a heavyset woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Florence. She looked up as I approached. Help you? Natalie Orr. I'm her uncle, Michael. Her expression shifted. Sympathy, the kind you give to someone before delivering bad news. Mr. Orr, let me check on her status. She made a call, spoke quietly, nodded several times, hung up and turned back to me. She's still in surgery, has been for, let me see, about 8 hours now. The doctor will come speak with you as soon as possible. You can wait in the family room down the hall. 3rd door on the right. 8 hours? I'm afraid I can't give you medical details. The doctor will explain everything. The family room was small and beige. Uncomfortable chairs arranged in rows, a television mounted in the corner showing some cable news channel with the sound muted. I sat down, stood up, sat down again. Time passed, I don't know how much. Finally, the door opened. The man who entered looked exhausted. Middle-aged, gray at the temples, surgical scrubs stained with what I prayed wasn't my niece's blood. He moved like someone who'd been on his feet for far too long and had no end in sight. Mr. Orr, I stood. Here. I'm Dr. Morton. I've been operating on your niece. She's out of surgery now and in recovery. Is she going to be okay? He paused. That pause told me everything and nothing at once. Let's sit down. We sat. He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees, the posture of a man about to deliver news no one wants to hear. Miss Orr was found on the side of a county road in Crockett County. She'd been badly beaten and sexually assaulted multiple times by multiple assailants. They used foreign objects as well as... He didn't finish the sentence, didn't have to. She was near death when she arrived here. We've performed multiple surgical interventions to address her injuries. He listed them like items on a medical chart. Clinical, professional, each one a hammer blow, spleen removed due to rupture, hysterectomy due to internal damage, temporary colostomy due to intestinal trauma, broken jaw now wired shut, multiple missing teeth, Several broken ribs, fractured cheekbone, shattered eye socket, skull fracture, brain swelling. We had to remove a portion of her skull to relieve pressure on the brain, Dr. Morton continued. We've induced a medical coma to give her body time to heal. She'll remain in that state for at least the next few weeks. I heard the words, processed them, filed them away in a place where I could examine them later. Right now, I couldn't feel them, couldn't let myself feel them. What are her chances? Physically, we'll know more in the next 48 hours, but I'm cautiously optimistic about her survival. And mentally, another pause. Longer this time. Miss Orr suffered significant trauma to her brain. Whether there's permanent damage, we won't know until she wakes up, and even then it could take months or years to understand the full extent. She's a genius, a researcher, her work is important. I understand, I'm sorry, we've done everything we can. He stood, I stood. He shook my hand with the automatic courtesy of a man who delivered bad news 1,000 times before. You should get some rest. There's a hotel across the street that offers discounts for families of patients. Miss Orr will be in the ICU when she comes out of recovery. You can see her tomorrow. He left. I stood in that beige room for a long time. Minutes, maybe hours. The muted television continued its silent broadcast of a world that seemed impossibly far away. Then I did what needed to be done. I walked across the street to the hotel, booked a room for an indefinite stay, took a shower so hot it nearly scalded my skin, ordered food from room service that I barely tasted. Then I called my foreman. Carl, I'm going to be here for a while. I don't know how long. Whatever you need, Mickey, I've got things handled. I know you do. If there's an emergency, call me, otherwise you're in charge. Understood? How is she? Bad, real bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Something had shifted inside me during that conversation with Dr. Morton, something fundamental. The shock and grief were still there, but beneath them was something else, something cold and hard and patient. I didn't know it then, but I was already beginning to change. The man who'd flown to Jackson that day, the mechanic and farmer who fixed tractors and worried about his niece, was starting to disappear. In his place, something darker was taking shape. Something that would not rest until the people who did this faced a reckoning. But that would come later. For now, I just sat in that hotel room and waited for tomorrow. For the chance to see what they'd done to my beautiful, brilliant Natalie. For the moment when my transformation would become complete. 2 days passed before I could bring myself to make the call. I'd spent that time in a haze. Hospital, hotel, hospital again. Sitting beside Natalie's bed in the ICU, watching machines breathe for her, watching numbers flicker on screens that meant nothing and everything at once. Her face was swollen beyond recognition. Bandages covered most of her head. Tubes ran in and out of her body like she was some kind of science experiment. My beautiful, brilliant niece, reduced to this. On the third morning, I woke up with something other than grief in my chest. Something harder, colder. I needed answers. I needed to know who did this to her. I started with the Crockett County Sheriff's Department. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up, a woman's voice, bored and flat. Crockett County Sheriff, how can I direct your call? I need to speak with someone about an assault that happened in your county 3 days ago. A young woman named Natalie Orr. Pause, the sound of typing. 1 moment, sir. Hold music, some country song I didn't recognize, then a man's voice, deeper and more guarded. This is Deputy Harris, you're asking about an assault. That's right, my niece, Natalie Orr. She was found on the side of a road in your county, beaten nearly to death. I want to know what you're doing about it. Another pause, longer this time. Sir, I don't have any record of an incident matching that description. Excuse me? We haven't received any reports of an assault on a young woman in the past week. Are you sure it happened in Crockett County? I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. She was medevaced from your county hospital to Jackson. She's been in surgery for the better part of 3 days. Someone in your jurisdiction damn well knows what happened to her. I'm sorry, sir. I've checked our system and there's nothing here. Perhaps you have incorrect information about the location. I don't have incorrect information. I have a niece in the ICU with her skull cracked open. Sir, I understand you're upset, but I can't help you if there's no report on file. You might want to contact the state police if you believe a crime occurred. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I called the Crockett County Hospital. This conversation went differently. Yes, sir, I remember her clearly, the admissions nurse said. Her voice was quiet, almost whispering. Young black woman badly injured. We stabilized her as best we could and called for a helicopter transfer. She wouldn't have survived the drive to Jackson. Did you report it to the sheriff's department? Of course we did. Deputy came out personally. We gave him everything. The rape kit photographs of her injuries, our preliminary medical report. He signed for all of it. Which deputy? I don't think I should. Please, she's my niece. I need to know what happened to her. A long pause, then barely audible. Cummins, Chief Deputy Jimmy Cummins. I thanked her and hung up. So, the sheriff's department had received a full report on Natalie's assault. Photographs, medical evidence, a rape kit. And when I called asking about it, they claimed to have no record of any incident. That told me everything I needed to know about getting justice through official channels. I spent the rest of that day at the hospital, sitting beside Natalie's bed. The doctors came and went, speaking in their clinical language about swelling and pressure and cautious optimism. I nodded at the appropriate moments, asked the expected questions, but my mind was elsewhere. Someone had done this to her, someone with enough power to make the evidence disappear. Late that afternoon, an orderly came in to check on some of the equipment. Black man, mid-30s, with close-cropped hair and tired eyes. He moved quietly, efficiently, but I caught him glancing at me more than once. "You're the uncle," he said finally. "The one who flew in from Alabama. Word travels fast. Hospital's not that big." He finished what he was doing, then turned to face me directly. "I'm Jasper Williams. I grew up in Crockett County." Something in his tone made me pay attention. "You know something." He looked at the door, then back at me. "I know a lot of things. Question is whether you want to hear them." "I want to know who did this to my niece." Jasper nodded slowly. "Then we should talk, but not here." The next morning, I remembered Natalie's car. It was still in Crockett County, probably in some impound lot racking up storage fees. I needed to retrieve it anyway, and it gave me an excuse to take Jasper up on his offer. He had a day off coming, and he volunteered to drive me up to get the Mercedes if I paid for gas. We left Jackson just after sunrise. Jasper drove an old Honda Civic that had seen better days, but the engine ran smooth enough. The man knew how to maintain a vehicle. For the first hour, we made small talk. Where I was from, what I did for a living. He seemed genuinely interested in the farm equipment business, asked technical questions that showed he wasn't just being polite. Turns out his grandfather had farmed before everything went to hell. Then somewhere around the halfway point, the conversation shifted. "You called the sheriff's department," Jasper said. It wasn't a question. "They said they had no record of any assault." "Course they didn't." He kept his eyes on the road. "They're the ones who did it." I turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. The sheriff's department runs that county, has for 3 generations now. Sheriff Cummins' daddy ran things before him. His granddaddy before that goes all the way back to Reconstruction. And they just attack people. Not directly, not usually, they've got ways." Jasper's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "See, the sheriff keeps files on everyone who matters. Every white businessman, every politician, every judge, affairs, money problems. That one time they got caught doing something they shouldn't. He's been collecting dirt for decades. His daddy did the same. Blackmail. Protection, they call it. Mutual understanding. You don't cause trouble for him, he doesn't cause trouble for you. Works real well for keeping the power structure nice and stable. And for people who don't have secrets to exploit?" Jasper's jaw tightened. "That's what his boys are for. Got a crew of local trash that handles the dirty work. Someone starts making noise, asking questions, trying to change things. Accidents happen, houses catch fire, people disappear." I thought about what Natalie had been doing in Crockett County, encouraging voter registration, helping people exercise their legal rights, threatening the established order. "Your niece was stirring things up," Jasper continued. "Talking to folks who'd been too scared to talk for years, getting them thinking maybe they could make a difference. The powers that be didn't appreciate that. So they had her beaten and raped to send a message. That's how it works, has been working that way for longer than I've been alive." He glanced at me. "My family got out when I was 18. Granny stayed behind, too old to start over," she said, "but she keeps her head down, knows what happens to people who don't." "Does she know who specifically attacked Natalie?" "She knows the group. The crew that handles this kind of thing, but specific names," he shrugged. I could ask. She might talk to you if I vouch for you, but it'd have to be quiet. Anyone finds out she's sharing information with outsiders, her house burns next. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't some kind of legal situation where you gather evidence and take it to court. Nobody's coming to help. Not the state police, not the feds, nobody. Too much trouble for a county nobody cares about. I stared out the window at the Mississippi countryside rolling past. Green fields, blue sky, a beautiful place hiding ugly secrets. So what you're telling me, I said slowly, is that if something's going to be done about what happened to my niece, I'll have to do it myself. Jasper was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's exactly what I'm telling you. We retrieved the Mercedes from a lot on the outskirts of the county seat. The owner tried to charge me $500 in storage fees. I paid without arguing, didn't want to draw attention. The car was undamaged, which surprised me. They'd beaten Natalie half to death but left her $200,000 vehicle without a scratch. Made a kind of 6 cents, I suppose. The car could be traced. The girl was just another troublemaker who'd gotten what was coming to her. After collecting the car, Jasper took me to meet his grandmother. She lived in a small house on the black side of town, which was exactly as neglected as you'd expect. Potholed streets, overgrown lots, the kind of infrastructure decay that comes from decades of municipal indifference. Her house was tidy, though, well-maintained. A small garden out front with tomatoes and collard greens. She was waiting for us on the porch. Small woman, early 80s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had seen too much. She looked me over without speaking, then nodded once and led us inside. The living room was clean and sparse. A couch, 2 chairs, a coffee table with a Bible on it. Photographs on the walls of people I didn't know. Jasper says you want to know about the men who hurt your niece, she said without preamble. Yes, ma'am. Why? I considered lying. Considered saying something about justice, about making sure it didn't happen to anyone else. But this woman had spent 80 years learning to read people, and I figured she'd see right through anything but the truth. Because I'm going to kill them. Jasper inhaled sharply. His grandmother just studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You mean that? She said finally. Yes, ma'am, I do, she nodded slowly. There's a group of them, white trash mostly. Do the dirty work when the sheriff needs something done that can't be traced back to his office. 4 men usually, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, depending on the job. Do you know their names? Names float around, but I don't know which ones specifically took your girl. They rotate, keeps anyone from identifying a pattern. How would I find out? You'd have to get close to them, earn their trust, listen when they talk. She leaned forward. These aren't smart men, Mr. Orr. They drink too much and brag too much. Given time, they'll tell you everything you want to know. They just have to believe you're one of them. One of them. A certain kind of white man, the kind who thinks like they do, talks like they do, hates like they do. Her eyes bored into mine. Can you pretend to be that man? I thought about my summers with Uncle Ricky, the good old boys at the feed store. The redneck bars where I drunk cheap beer and listened to country music. I knew the type, had grown up around them even if I'd never been one of them. Yes, ma'am, I believe I can. She sat back. Then God help you, and God help them when you find them. I drove the Mercedes back to Jackson that evening, following Jasper's Honda through the gathering dusk. My mind was racing, turning over everything I'd learned. The sheriff's protection racket, the enforcement crew, the wall of silence that protected them all. But there was something else nagging at me. Something I'd forgotten in the chaos of the past few days. The cameras. I'd installed front and rear cameras in Natalie's car before she left. High-quality units with sensitive microphones that would record everything within range. She'd promised to flip them on if she was ever stopped for any reason, if she'd kept that promise. I pressed harder on the accelerator, suddenly desperate to get back to Jackson, to get to my laptop, to see what the cameras had recorded. The hotel room felt smaller than before, walls pressing in. Air too thick to breathe. I sat at the small desk with my laptop open, the Mercedes parked in the lot below. The sun had set hours ago, but I hadn't bothered to turn on any lights, just the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the darkness. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me didn't want to do this, didn't want to see whatever the cameras had captured. Some things once seen can never be unseen. Some knowledge changes you forever, but I needed to know. needed to see their faces, needed to understand exactly what they had done to my niece. I plugged in the portable hard drive I'd retrieved from the car's hidden compartment and began downloading the footage. The files were large, high-definition video with audio. It took nearly 20 minutes for everything to transfer. I spent that time staring at the progress bar, trying to prepare myself for what was coming. When the download finished, I took a deep breath, opened the first file, pressed play. The recording began with Natalie driving down a rural county road. Through the front camera, I could see the windshield view, 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through flat farmland. Cotton fields on one side, soybeans on the other, late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the road. Natalie was humming something. I couldn't make out the tune, but the sound of her voice hit me like a punch to the gut. So normal, so alive. So completely unaware of what was about to happen. Then in the rearview camera, I saw the lights. A sheriff's cruiser pulling out from a side road. No siren, just the lights, flashing red and blue in the Mississippi sunshine. Natalie noticed. I heard her sigh, saw the car slow down as she pulled onto the shoulder. "What now?" she muttered, but she remembered. God bless her, she remembered. Through the camera, I watched her hand reach out and flip the recording switch, making sure everything that followed would be captured. She rolled down her window and waited. The deputy approached from behind. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the tan uniform of the Crockett County Sheriff's Department. I couldn't see his face yet, just his torso filling the driver's side window. "What seems to be the problem, officer?" Natalie asked. Her voice was calm, polite, the voice of someone who'd been taught how to interact with police. The response was immediate, brutal. "Out of the car, bitch." Natalie's head jerked back slightly. "Excuse me. I said get your N********** R ass out of that car right now before I pull you out." I felt something cold settle in my chest. A frozen rage that went deeper than anger, deeper than grief. This was hatred, pure and simple, the raw ugliness of a man who saw my niece as less than human. "Why?" Natalie asked, still trying to be reasonable, still believing in a world where reason mattered. The deputy didn't answer with words. The car door flew open. Hands grabbed Natalie, hauled her out of the vehicle. The camera captured everything, the way he slammed her against the side of the car, the brutal efficiency with which he yanked her arms behind her back and snapped on handcuffs. Then he dragged her to the rear of the Mercedes and smashed her face into the trunk lid. The sound. Jesus Christ, the sound. She crumpled. He let her fall. And for the first time, his face came into clear view of the rear camera. Chief Deputy Jimmy Cummins, exactly as the hospital nurse had said. He pulled out his phone, dialing without looking, keeping his eyes on Natalie's form curled on the ground. "I got her," he said. "Send the boys to pick her up, take her to the cabin. Dad wants her worked over good, damaged but not dead. Preferably sufficiently damaged that she pays for her trouble making the rest of her days." A pause while the other person spoke. "Yeah, I know. I'll swing by the office and let him know we got her. Should be about 20 minutes. He hung up, looked down at Natalie, smiled. Then he walked back to his cruiser and drove away. I paused the video. My hands were shaking, not from fear. Not from sorrow, from something else entirely, something that felt like cold fire spreading through my veins. I forced myself to take a breath, then another. When my hands steadied, I pressed play. The footage continued. Natalie lay on the ground beside her car for nearly 20 minutes. I could hear her moaning softly, see her trying to move. The handcuffs kept her arms pinned behind her back. Then a pickup truck appeared. Beat-up Dodge, probably 20 years old, rust spots on the fender. It pulled up behind the Mercedes and 3 men climbed out. I studied their faces as they approached, memorized every feature. The first was heavyset with a thick beard and a John Deere cap. He moved with the lazy confidence of someone who'd done this before. The second was thinner, wiry, with a receding hairline and a nose that had been broken at least once. He was grinning, actually grinning. The third was younger than the other two. Mid-30s, maybe, flannel shirt, work boots, the build of someone who did manual labor for a living. "Where's the bitch?" the first one asked. "Right here." They gathered around Natalie. The heavy-set one prodded her with his boot. "Don't look like much," he said. "Don't matter what she looks like, just matters that we make an example." 2 of them grabbed Natalie's ankles, bound them together with rope. Then they lifted her like she was nothing, just a sack of meat to be disposed of, threw her in the bed of the pickup. She cried out when she landed. The sound was barely human. "Be careful," one of them said, laughing. "Sheriff wants her damaged, not dead. Dead attracts attention." The truck pulled away. The timestamp on the video read 4:47 p.m. 4 hours and 12 minutes later, the truck returned. I watched through the rear camera as it pulled up beside the Mercedes. Watched as two of the men, the heavyset one and the younger one, climbed out of the cab. They walked to the bed of the truck, reached in, pulled out something that barely resembled a human being. Natalie's clothes were torn. Blood covered her face, her arms, her legs. She wasn't moving, wasn't making any sound at all. They dropped her on the ground like garbage, didn't even look back as they climbed into the truck and drove away. The timestamp read 9:03 p.m. For the next several hours, Natalie lay there, alone, dying. The camera recorded everything: the slow darkening of the sky, the sounds of insects, the occasional car passing in the distance without stopping. Then, just after midnight, an old sedan pulled up. Two elderly black men got out. They approached slowly, carefully, as if afraid of what they might find. When they saw Natalie, one of them doubled over like he'd been punched. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "Look what they done to this child." "You know who did it," the other one said. His voice was flat, tired, the voice of someone who'd seen this before. "You know why. We got to get her to a hospital. She won't last much longer out here." They moved with surprising gentleness, these two old men, lifted Natalie as carefully as they could, carried her to their sedan, laid her in the back seat. "You think she'll make it?" the first one asked. "Don't know, but she's got a better chance with us than she does lying in this ditch." They drove away. The camera recorded their license plate, which I later traced to find out who they were. Two men in their 80s who'd lived in Crockett County their entire lives. Two men who'd risked their own safety to save a stranger. They both died within months of that night. Natural causes, according to the records, but I've always wondered. I never got the chance to thank them. I sat in the darkness for a long time after the video ended. 3 faces. I had 3 faces now. Plus Jimmy Cummins. 4 men who had destroyed my niece's life on the orders of a sheriff who believed he was above the law. 4 men who were going to die. The thought should have shocked me. Should have made me recoil from myself, from the cold-blooded killer I was becoming. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I thought of Confucius. "Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves." The old sage was right. This path would likely be the end of me. But as I sat there, watching the faces of Natalie's attackers frozen on my screen, I found I didn't care. I would dig those graves, all 5 of them if necessary, and I would fill them with the men who'd hurt my girl. 2 weeks after the attack, the doctors finally brought Natalie out of her induced coma. I was there when she opened her eyes. Had been there every day, leaving only to eat and sleep. The nurses knew me by name, knew to call me if anything changed. When Dr. Morton came by that morning and said they were going to start reducing the sedation, I pulled a chair up beside her bed and waited. It took hours. Her eyes fluttered open sometime around 3 in the afternoon. At first, they just wandered, unfocused, scanning the ceiling without comprehension. Then they found me. "Uncle Mickey," my heart cracked open. "Hey, kid, I'm here." Where am I?" "Hospital, Jackson, Mississippi. You were hurt, but you're going to be okay." She blinked slowly, processing, trying to remember. "My head hurts." "I know, the doctors are giving you medicine for the pain." "Okay." A long pause. "Is this my room? It's very white." Something cold settled in my stomach, the way she was talking, the simple sentences, the childlike observations. "It's a hospital room. You'll be out of here soon." "Okay." She smiled at me then, a trusting, innocent smile. Like a child who believes everything will be fine because an adult said so. "I'm tired." "Go back to sleep, kid. I'll be here when you wake up." She closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was unconscious again. I found Dr. Morton in the hallway. "Her speech patterns," I said. "The way she's processing information, something's wrong." He nodded slowly. "We were afraid of this." The brain trauma she suffered was severe. We won't know the full extent of the damage for some time, but what? But based on my initial assessment, Miss Orr appears to be functioning at a significantly reduced cognitive level, roughly equivalent to a child of 7 or 8. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. Natalie was a genius, a PhD at 21. One of the brightest minds of her generation. Will she recover? I don't know. The brain has remarkable plasticity. Given time, therapy, the right care, it's possible she could regain some of what she's lost. But Mr. Orr, I need to be honest with you. It's equally possible that this is permanent. I stood there in that antiseptic hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The men who did this hadn't just beaten and raped my niece. They'd stolen her mind, taken the thing that made her special, made her extraordinary, and smashed it to pieces. "Thank you, doctor," I heard myself say. He nodded and walked away. I went back to Natalie's room. Sat beside her bed, watched her sleep, and began to plan. The next month was a blur of surgeries and slow recovery. Natalie's colostomy was reversed. Her jaw was unwired. Plastic surgeons worked on her cheekbone and eye socket, doing their best to restore what had been broken. Dental implants were begun to replace the teeth she'd lost. Physically, she healed. The body is resilient. The body repairs itself. Her mind was another matter. The cognitive assessments confirmed what Dr. Morton had suspected. Natalie's intellectual function had regressed to roughly the level of an 8-year-old. She could read simple books, could handle basic math, could carry on conversations about everyday topics, but the brilliant researcher who'd been on track to cure cancer? Gone. Perhaps forever. When she was finally well enough to leave the hospital, I took her home. Not to her apartment in the city where she'd worked, to my farm in Alabama, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. I couldn't care for her alone. I needed help. After interviewing nearly 24 candidates, I hired Matt and Rachel Simmons, young couple, late 20s, both with backgrounds in healthcare. Matt had been a nursing aide before his back gave out. Rachel had worked in a group home for adults with developmental disabilities. They were kind, patient, and desperately needed the job. I offered them 3 times the going rate, plus free housing in the tenant cottage on my property, plus a retirement fund I'd set up to ensure their future security. "We want you to understand something," I told them on the day they moved in. "Natalie is my family. She's brilliant, even if her brilliance is hidden right now. I need people who will treat her with dignity, with love, who will be her friends, not just her caretakers." Rachel looked at Natalie, who was sitting on the porch swing watching the clouds drift by. "She seems sweet," Rachel said. She always was." I cleared my throat. "I have to go away for a while, business that can't wait. I need to know she'll be safe and happy while I'm gone." "How long will you be away?" "I'm not sure. Months, possibly, maybe longer." Matt and Rachel exchanged a look, but the money was too good to question, and they genuinely seemed to care about doing well. "We'll take good care of her," Matt promised. "You have our word." I nodded, shook his hand, went inside to pack. The transformation was about to begin. For the next 3 months, I systematically erased Michael Orr and became someone else. The first month was physical. I stopped shaving, stopped cutting my hair, let my beard grow out thick and scraggly. My hair, which I'd always kept short and neat, became a shaggy mess that curled around my ears and collar. I spent hours in front of the mirror practicing. The slouch of a man who'd never had ambition. The slow drawl of someone who'd never left the county he was born in. The casual racism that peppered the speech of men I'd grown up around but never become. The accent came naturally enough. I'd spent enough summers with Uncle Ricky to know how to sound like a local, but I had to work on the attitudes, the casual cruelty, the bone-deep conviction that some people were simply worth less than others. I practiced on strangers, gas station attendants, convenience store clerks, made offhand comments, tested reactions, refined my approach. By the end of that first month, I could pass. The second month was logistics. I drove to Jackson, found a private seller offering a 10-year-old Ford pickup. Paid cash. The seller didn't ask questions, just handed over the keys. The plates were still in his name, which suited me fine. If anything went wrong, the truck couldn't be traced back to Michael Orr. I also created my cover story. Spent hours crafting the details, anticipating questions, preparing lies that couldn't be easily disproven. The story was simple. I'd been sleeping with a cop's wife in Jackson. The husband found out, hired some people to teach me a lesson. I needed to disappear for a while until things cooled down. No paper trail, no forwarding address, no employment records that could lead back to me. It was the kind of story that would make sense to the kind of people I needed to fool. The kind of story that would explain why I wanted to be paid off the books, why I needed a place to lie low, why I was reluctant to talk about my past. The third month, I made my move. Crockett County had 6 small auto repair shops. I visited each one looking for work, told my story. demonstrated my skills by diagnosing problems that had stumped their regular mechanics. Buck's Garage hired me on the spot. Buck himself was a heavy-set man in his 60s who'd been running the place since his father died. He didn't care about paperwork or taxes or any of the things that would create a trail. He just needed someone who could fix transmissions, and I was the best he'd ever seen. I found a trailer for rent 5 miles outside the county seat, barely habitable. Leaky roof, questionable plumbing, a smell I never could identify, but it had a bed and a stove and a door that locked. Home sweet home. With a job and a residence established, I started visiting the local bars. There were 3 places in Crockett County where white trash gathered to drink. The Rusty Nail, a dive near the highway. Pete's Place, a slightly more respectable establishment in the county seat. And Millie's, a ramshackle building on the outskirts of town that served cheap beer and didn't ask questions. I rotated between all 3, nursing drinks, playing pool, listening more than I talked, learning the rhythms of the community. The gossip, the grudges, the petty dramas that consumed people who had nothing better to think about. It didn't take long to identify my targets. Donnie was the first one I recognized. Heavy-set, thick beard, John Deere cap. He was a regular at Millie's, showing up most evenings around 7 and drinking until close. I learned he was a part-time trucker whose real income came from growing marijuana on a 40-acre plot outside town. Used corn as cover crop, kept the operation just small enough to avoid aerial detection. He also loved to hunt feral hogs, talked about it constantly, had permanent stands set up on several local farms with the owner's permission. Went out 2 or 3 nights a week during peak season. Billy Bob was harder to find. He worked for the county road crew, which meant irregular hours and less time for bar hopping. But he showed up at Millie's occasionally, usually to complain about his boss. Thin guy, wiry, broken nose, lived in a trailer about 10 miles from town. The interesting thing about Billy Bob was his history. He'd had accidents before, chainsaw mishaps mostly. Guy was careless with tools. His coworkers joked about it, said it was only a matter of time before he cut something important. That information would prove useful. Jethro was the youngest of the 3, handyman who picked up odd jobs around the county, currently renovating an old farmhouse that he'd bought cheap at auction. Lived there while he worked on it, camping out in the habitable parts. The property had a root cellar out back. Jethro used it for storage. The old-timers at Millie's warned him about the snakes. Rattlers liked to den up in places like that. Jethro said he wasn't worried, said he'd killed plenty of snakes in his time. Then there was Jimmy Cummins. The chief deputy was harder to approach. He didn't drink at the regular bars, didn't socialize with the common folk, but I found his house easy enough. Nice place in a little valley surrounded by wooded hills. He lived alone, but he had frequent visitors. Women, mostly, different ones on different nights. He had patterns. When he was alone, he'd come out onto his back deck around sunset. Stand there with a cigar and a drink, looking out at his property like a king surveying his domain. Those hills around his house gave me ideas, but that would come later. First, I needed to deal with the other 3. I worked on Donnie for 3 weeks before making my move, pool games mostly. I positioned myself at the table next to his regular spot at Millie's and waited for him to notice. Didn't take long. Guys like Donnie love an audience, love someone new to brag to. By the 3rd night, we were playing partners against whoever walked in the door. "You shoot pretty good," he said after I sank a difficult bank shot. "Where'd you learn?" "Here and there. My uncle had a table in his basement, spent a lot of time down there as a kid." "What brings you to Crockett County?" I gave him the cover story. The cop's wife, the need to disappear. He ate it up. Nothing Donnie loved more than a story about someone screwing over a cop. Over the following weeks, I learned everything about him. His marijuana operation, his various side hustles, his divorce, which had been ugly, his kid who lived with the ex and wanted nothing to do with him, and his hogs. God, the man loved to hunt hogs, talked about it every chance he got. The damage they did to crops. The money farmers paid him to thin the herds, the thrill of sitting in a stand in the dark, waiting for the sounds of the herd moving through the brush. "Got a call today," he said one Thursday evening. "Mike Jones, you know him? Farmer out on County Road 12. Says he's got a herd tearing up his back 40. 20, maybe 30 animals, wants me to come out tonight and take care of it." "Tonight?" I asked casually. "You going alone?" Usually do, more fun that way, just me and my rifle and the pigs, nature red in tooth and claw, you know. He laughed at his own joke. Plus, more kills for me means more money in my pocket. Mike pays by the head. I nodded, filed the information away, and excused myself an hour later. Said I had an early morning. Instead, I drove out to County Road 12. Mike Jones's farm was easy to find. Couple hundred acres of soybean fields with a woodlot in the back where the hogs liked to shelter during the day. I'd scouted it twice before, once during the day to get the lay of the land and once at night to understand the sight lines. Donnie's stand was on the edge of the woodlot, overlooking a clearing where the hogs came to root for food. Permanent structure, maybe 10 feet off the ground. Good vantage point. I parked my truck half a mile away off a side road where it wouldn't be visible to anyone approaching. Walked through the woods in the dark, moving slow and quiet, just like Uncle Ricky taught me. The stand was empty when I arrived. Donnie was still at Millie's, finishing his beer. I had maybe an hour before he showed up. I settled into position near the base of the stand, drew my taser, waited. The night was warm and humid, crickets singing. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. I focused on my breathing, keeping it slow and steady, preparing myself for what was about to happen. An hour later, I heard Donnie's truck coming down the farm road. Headlights cut through the darkness, then went out. The engine stopped. A door opened and closed, footsteps on packed earth coming closer. Donnie appeared out of the shadows, rifle over his shoulder, a case of beer in one hand. He was humming something, completely unaware of my presence. He walked right past me. I hit him with the taser as he reached for the ladder. The shock put him down hard. He dropped the beer, collapsed onto his side, body convulsing. I stepped forward, kicked the rifle away, and hit him again to make sure he stayed down. By the time he recovered enough to speak, I had him trussed like a hog headed for slaughter. Wrists bound behind his back, ankles tied together. Dragged him 30 yards out into the clearing where the hogs would find him. What? What the hell? He was gasping, confused, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who are you? What do you want? Just want to talk, Donnie. Talk, you tased me, tied me up. He struggled against the ropes, but I'd learned knots in the army that weren't coming undone. Who the hell are you? I crouched down beside him, let him see my face clearly in the moonlight. You recognize me. You're that mechanic from Millie's. What the hell, man? Let me ask you something, Donnie. You remember a young black woman you and your friends grabbed a few months back? Pretty girl in a fancy Mercedes. His face changed, the confusion giving way to something warier. Don't know what you're talking about. I hit him with the taser again, lower setting this time, just enough to hurt. Try again, he gasped, writhing in the dirt. Okay, yeah, I remember. What about it? That was my niece. Silence. The crickets kept singing, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Your niece. Her name is Natalie. She was a genius, Donnie, a real honest-to-God genius. Could have done great things with her life. Now she can barely remember how to tie her shoes. Look, man, he licked his lips, eyes darting around looking for escape. That wasn't personal. We were just doing what we were told. Jimmy said, I don't care what Jimmy said. I want to know what you did. We didn't kill her. We were supposed to rough her up, that's all. Send a message. You beat her. You raped her. You broke her skull and destroyed her mind. My voice was flat, emotionless. I barely recognized it as my own. And now you're going to pay for it. Wait. Real fear now, the fear of a man who finally understands what's happening to him. We can work something out. I got money, I can. I don't want your money, Donnie. I pulled out my knife, Uncle Ricky's old hunting knife. I want your life. His screams echoed across the empty field as I began to cut. I was methodical about it. First the tendons behind his knees, then the ones in his elbows. He wouldn't be crawling anywhere, wouldn't be dragging himself to safety. Just lying there in the dirt, bleeding, helpless. Then I cut open his shirt and drew the blade across his belly. Shallow cuts. Nothing that would kill him quickly. Just enough to let the blood flow, to let the smell carry on the night breeze. What? What are you doing? He was sobbing now, the tough guy from Millie's reduced to a blubbering wreck. Oh God, please. Calling the hogs. I wiped the blade on his shirt and stepped back. They can smell blood from a mile away. Won't take long for them to find you. No. No. I picked up his rifle and his knife, moved them well out of reach. Then I walked over to the hunting stand and climbed up. Please, he screamed after me. Please, you can't do this. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said quietly. I bet you are. The hogs came about 40 minutes later. I watched through Donnie's own rifle scope as the first ones emerged from the tree line. Massive animals, some of them, 300 pounds, maybe more. Razorback boars with tusks that could gut a man in seconds. They moved cautiously at first, sniffing the air. Then the big boar in front caught Donnie's scent. Blood, fear, easy prey. It approached slowly, sniffed at the wounds on Donnie's stomach, then it bit. Donnie's screams were unlike anything I'd ever heard, primal, inhuman. The sound of a creature being eaten alive. More hogs joined the feast. I lost count after a dozen. They pushed and shoved each other, fighting for position, tearing at the meat. Donnie kept screaming for a long time, longer than I expected. Then he stopped. I sat in that stand for another hour, watching the hogs finish their meal. When they finally wandered off, there wasn't much left. Bones. Scraps of clothing, nothing that looked human anymore. I climbed down from the stand, retrieved the beer Donnie had dropped, placed the empty bottles near what remained of his body. Then I walked back to my truck and drove away. The next evening at Millie's, word had already spread. "Did you hear about Donnie?" "Yeah, man, crazy stuff. Mike Jones found him this morning, what was left of him." "What happened?" "Hog got him, must have wounded one, gone down to finish it off. Thing turned on him. Damn, dangerous animals, them hogs." "Yep, heard Jones is still throwing up, said it looked like they'd been at Donnie for hours." I sat at the bar, nursing my beer, listening to them talk. Nobody suspected anything. Why would they? Donnie was a hog hunter. Accidents happened. Everyone knew the risks. 1 down, 3 to go. Several weeks passed after Donnie's death. I kept my head down, went to work at Buck's garage every morning, fixed transmissions and rebuilt engines, ate lunch at the diner on Main Street, drank beer at Millie's in the evenings, just another redneck passing through, keeping a low profile. The talk about Donnie faded. These things happen, people said. Hog hunting's dangerous work. Man should have been more careful. Nobody suspected a thing, but I wasn't idle during those weeks. I was watching, waiting, planning my next move. Billy Bob was harder to pin down than Donnie had been. His schedule was irregular, his movements unpredictable. The county road crew worked different parts of the county on different days, and Billy Bob rarely knew where he'd be assigned until he showed up for work each morning. But I'd learned something useful during my time at Millie's. Billy Bob's boss didn't like him. The feeling was mutual. Whenever a crap job came in, something nobody wanted to do, guess who got assigned? Billy Bob. And the crappiest jobs were the solo ones, clearing debris from remote roads, patching potholes in the black neighborhoods where nobody important would complain about the delay. One-man tasks that kept him away from the rest of the crew. That's where I'd find my opportunity. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. I'd placed a large, dead branch across County Road 7 the night before. Middle of nowhere, 10 miles from the nearest house. The kind of obstruction that would take one man with a chainsaw maybe an hour to clear. I reported it from a burner phone I'd picked up in Jackson. Disguised my voice. Said I was a farmer who'd found the road blocked on my way to check my fields. Then I drove out to the site and waited. 2 hours later, Billy Bob's county truck appeared on the horizon. I was hidden in the tree line, maybe 50 yards from the road, close enough to see clearly, far enough to stay invisible. I watched him pull up behind the branch, climb out, walk around the obstruction with his hands on his hips. He was wearing the standard county road crew uniform. Orange safety vest, work boots, heavy gloves. He kicked at the branch, tested its weight, then walked back to the truck to retrieve his chainsaw. The saw was a big Stihl professional grade. He checked the fuel, tested the chain tension, pulled the cord to start it up. The motor caught on the third try, settling into a loud, steady growl. Billy Bob approached the branch and began cutting. I moved. He never heard me coming. The chainsaw was too loud, his attention too focused on the work in front of him. I came up behind him fast, taser already in my hand. The prongs hit him between the shoulder blades. He dropped the saw and went down hard. The chainsaw bounced on the asphalt, blade still spinning for a few seconds before the motor died. Billy Bob lay there twitching, making sounds that weren't quite words. I picked up the chainsaw, checked the chain, still sharp. Good, by the time he recovered enough to speak, I was standing over him. What the hell? Morning, Billy Bob. He squinted up at me, recognition slowly dawning. You're that mechanic, from the garage, what are you? I hit him with the taser again, lower setting just enough to keep him compliant. He convulsed, gasped, went still. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to have an accident, lost control of the chainsaw, cut your leg, bled out before anyone found you. Tragic, but not surprising. Everyone knows you're careless with tools. Please, please, I don't. Do you remember a young woman you and your friends grabbed a few months back? Worked her over in some cabin outside of town. His face changed, fear mixed with something else, calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. Young black woman, fancy red Mercedes. Your buddy Jimmy Cummins pulled her over on a county road, handed her off to you and your friends. Still nothing, just that blank, calculating stare. Which one? He finally asked. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What did you say? Which one? We've done a lot of those jobs for Jimmy. You're gonna have to be more specific. Which one? The words echoed in my head. This piece of garbage had hurt so many women that he couldn't even remember my niece. She was just another job, another troublemaker dealt with, another body dumped on the side of the road. The one who was a genius, I said quietly. The one who had her whole life ahead of her. The one you beat so badly she'll never be the same again. Oh, a flicker of recognition. The one with the Mercedes, yeah, I remember her now, uppity little thing, kept screaming about her rights. I started the chainsaw. The sound was deafening in the morning silence. Billy Bob's eyes went wide. Wait. Wait, please, we can work something out. No, we can't. I got money, That woman was my niece. He stopped talking, stopped moving, just stared at me with the look of a man who finally understood he was going to die. She was brilliant, I continued. Could have changed the world. Now she can barely remember how to tie her shoes because of what you did. It wasn't personal. We were just following orders. Funny, that's what Donnie said too. His eyes widened further. Donnie, the Hogs, that was you? The Hogs just did what Hogs do. I just put him where they could find him. Oh God, please. I revved the chainsaw. The blade screamed. Help me, Billy Bob shouted at the empty road, the empty sky. Somebody help me. Nobody's coming. Nobody cares. I positioned the blade above his leg. Just like nobody came for Natalie. The cut was quick, diagonal across the thigh just above the knee. The blade went through flesh and muscle like they weren't even there. Blood sprayed across the asphalt, bright red in the morning sun. Billy Bob screamed, a raw animal sound that echoed off the trees. I stepped back. Set the chainsaw down nearby, still running. Let it look like he'd dropped it after cutting himself. Please. He was trying to crawl now, dragging himself toward the truck, leaving a red smear on the road behind him. Please, call someone, I'm bleeding out. I know. I'll die. I know. I watched him crawl for maybe 30 seconds. Then his arms gave out and he collapsed face down on the asphalt. The blood kept flowing, pooling around him, steaming slightly in the cool morning air. His breathing slowed, became ragged, then stopped. I waited another 5 minutes to be sure. Then I walked back to my truck, hidden in the woods half a mile away, and drove back to town. The news hit Millie's that evening. Did you hear about Billy Bob? What happened? Chainsaw accident, out on County Road 7, cut his leg damn near off, bled out before anybody found him. Damn, that boy always was careless. Third time he's had an accident with a saw, guess his luck finally ran out. I sat at the bar, nursing my beer, saying nothing, just another local absorbing the gossip. 2 down, 2 to go. Jethro was the youngest of the 3. Mid-30s, lean and wiry, with the kind of nervous energy that never quite settled. He did odd jobs around the county. Carpentry mostly, some plumbing, whatever paid cash and didn't ask too many questions. His current project was an old farmhouse about 15 miles outside of town. He'd bought the place cheap at a county auction, some foreclosure situation he bragged about at Millie's. Said he was going to fix it up, flip it for a profit. The American dream, redneck style. He lived there while he worked on it, camping out in the few rooms that were habitable, using a generator for power and hauling water from a well out back. Rough living, but Jethro didn't seem to mind. The interesting part was the root cellar. Old stone structure behind the main house, probably dating back to the original construction in the 1800s. Half buried in the hillside, with a heavy wooden door and stone steps leading down into the darkness. Jethro used it for storage. Tools, supplies, whatever he didn't want sitting out in the weather. The old-timers at Millie's had warned him about it. Watch out for snakes, one of them said. Rattlers love to den up in places like that, cool in summer, warm in winter, perfect habitat. Jethro just laughed. I've killed plenty of snakes in my time, they don't scare me. Famous last words. I spent 3 weeks collecting rattlesnakes. It wasn't as hard as you might think. Mississippi has plenty of them, especially in the rural areas. Eastern diamondbacks, mostly. Big ones, some of them 4 or 5 feet long. Dangerous as hell if you don't know what you're doing. But I knew what I was doing. Uncle Ricky had taught me how to handle snakes when I was a teenager. Not because he liked them, but because you had to know what you were dealing with when you worked on farms. I used a snake hook and a pair of heavy canvas bags. Found the snakes in the usual places. Rock piles, old barns, drainage culverts. Each one went into a bag, tied tight, stored in a cooler in the bed of my truck. By the time I was done, I had 6 of them. 6 eastern diamondbacks with enough venom to kill a grown man several times over. The night I made my move, Jethro was at Millie's getting drunk. I watched him for an hour, made sure he was well into his cups, then slipped out the back. Drove to his property, parked in a copse of trees where the truck wouldn't be visible from the road. The farmhouse was dark, no generator running. Jethro was the only one who ever came out here, and he wasn't home. I approached the root cellar with a flashlight in one hand and the first bag of snakes in the other. The door creaked when I opened it. Stone steps descended into blackness, the beam of my flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. The smell hit me immediately. Damp earth, old wood, something slightly organic. I untied the first bag and appended it onto the steps. The snake hit the ground with a heavy thump. It coiled immediately, tail buzzing, head raised in warning. I backed away slowly, giving it room to settle. Then I repeated the process with the other 5 bags, 6 rattlesnakes now loose in the root cellar. I closed the door, made sure it would open easily from the outside, and retreated to my truck to wait. Jethro came home around midnight. I heard his truck first, engine rumbling down the dirt road that led to the property. Headlights swept across the trees as he pulled into the yard. Then the engine cut off, the door opened, and Jethro stumbled out. He was drunk, really drunk, weaving as he walked, fumbling with his keys. He made it to the front door of the farmhouse, dropped his keys twice, finally managed to get inside. Lights came on, then went off again. I waited. Half an hour later, Jethro emerged from the back door, flashlight in hand, heading toward the root cellar. Probably needed something he'd stored down there. A tool, maybe, or more beer. I moved. The taser caught him from behind, just like the others. He went down hard, flashlight flying, body convulsing on the grass. By the time he recovered, I had him by the ankles, dragging him toward the root cellar. What? Who? Evening, Jethro. What the hell are you doing? I didn't answer, just kept dragging. He tried to fight, but the taser had taken most of the strength out of him. His hands clawed at the grass, leaving furrows in the dirt. We reached the cellar door. I propped it open with a rock. No, Jethro said. His voice had changed. He could see the darkness below, could smell whatever was down there. No, don't, I pushed him. He tumbled down the stone steps, crying out as he hit each one. At the bottom, he sprawled across the dirt floor, groaning. Then the rattling started. The sound was unmistakable. That dry, buzzing warning that every creature in the American South learns to fear from childhood. One rattle at first, then another, then more overlapping, building into a chorus of deadly percussion. Jethro screamed. "Snakes, there's snakes down here, help me!" I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the darkness. My flashlight caught movement below, coiled shapes, gleaming scales. Triangular heads raised in warning. Please. Jethro was trying to climb the stairs, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The fall had done something to his ankle. Please let me out. Do you remember Natalie Orr? What? Who? Young black woman. Your friends grabbed her on the road, took her to a cabin, beat her, raped her. I don't. She was my niece. The first bite came while he was still trying to process my words. He screamed again, clutching his arm. Then another bite, this time on his leg, then another. Help me, oh God, they're biting me, they won't stop. I watched him writhe in the darkness below. Watched the snakes strike again and again, pumping venom into his body. Each bite was another dose of poison, another step toward death. You and your friends destroyed her life, I said. Turned a genius into a child, and for what? Because she told people they had the right to vote. Please, I'm dying. I know. I'm sorry for what we did. Too late for sorry. I closed the door, dropped the heavy wooden bar into place, sealing it from the outside. His screams continued, muffled now but still audible. Begging, pleading, crying for help that would never come, I sat down on a rock nearby and listened. The screams went on for a long time. Then they faded to whimpers, then to silence. I waited another 2 hours just to be sure. Then I lifted the bar and opened the door. The flashlight revealed Jethro's body crumpled on the stairs, face swollen beyond recognition. Limbs contorted in the final agony of massive envenomation. The snakes were nowhere to be seen, probably retreated to the darker corners of the cellar. I left the door open. Let them find their own way out. Then I drove home. Jethro wasn't reported missing for 3 days. A customer finally came looking for him, wanting to know why he hadn't shown up to finish a job. Found his truck in the yard, the farmhouse empty, and eventually discovered the body in the root cellar. The story at Millie's wrote itself. Snakes got him, rattlers probably. Old-timers warned him about that cellar. Damn fool should have listened. Must have gone down there drunk, stumbled into a nest, never had a chance. Another tragic accident. Another reckless man meeting a predictable end. 3 down, 1 to go. Jimmy Cummins was different. The 3 men I'd already dealt with were thugs. Violent, stupid, predictable. They drank too much and talked too much and never saw me coming. Jimmy was a cop. A dirty cop, sure, but still trained, still alert, still dangerous in ways the others weren't. He'd also started asking questions. I heard the rumors at Millie's. The chief deputy was wondering about his friend's accidents. 3 men, all connected, all dead within a couple months. Coincidence? Maybe, but Jimmy didn't like coincidences. Close approach was too risky now. If I tried to get near him with a taser, there was a good chance he'd see me coming. And Jimmy carried a gun everywhere he went. So I decided to go long range. There was another reason, too, one I'd been thinking about for weeks. The first 3 deaths had been staged as accidents. Hog attack, chainsaw mishap, snake bite, tragic but explainable. The kind of things that happened in rural Mississippi with depressing regularity. A sniper killing was different. A sniper killing was murder. Obvious, undeniable murder. The kind of thing that brought in state investigators, federal agents, media attention. The kind of thing that couldn't be swept under the rug by a corrupt sheriff's department. I wanted the world to know that Jimmy Cummins had been executed, not because I craved recognition. I didn't, but because Crockett County had been operating in darkness for too long. A high-profile murder might finally shine some light into the shadows, might finally force the kind of scrutiny that the Cummins family had spent 3 generations avoiding. So I planned. The surveillance took weeks. Every evening, as soon as my shift at the garage ended, I drove out to the hills overlooking Jimmy's house. Found a spot in the tree line with a clear view of his back deck. Settled in with binoculars and watched. Jimmy was a creature of habit. When he had female company, which was often, he stayed inside until they arrived. When he was alone, he came out to the deck around sunset. Bourbon in one hand, cigar in the other, looking out at his property like he owned the world. Those solo evenings were my window. I measured the distance with a laser rangefinder. 327 yards from my position to the deck railing. A challenging shot, but well within the capabilities of Uncle Ricky's rifle. I'd made shots like this hundreds of times in competition. Never missed. Finally, on a Thursday evening in late autumn, everything aligned. Clear weather. No wind. Jimmy home alone, his cruiser the only vehicle in the driveway. I retrieved the rifle from its hiding place and made my way to the hillside. The grass was wet with evening dew. I settled into position, feeling the familiar weight of Uncle Ricky's Remington against my shoulder. The sling tight around my arm, the stock firm against my cheek, the scope bringing Jimmy's deck into sharp focus. He was there, exactly where I knew he'd be. Standing at the railing with his bourbon and cigar, looking out at the valley below, completely unaware that he was living the last minutes of his life. I centered the crosshairs on his pelvis, not his chest, not his head, his pelvis. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to lie there in agony, wondering what had happened, feeling his life drain away. The way Natalie had suffered on that roadside. The way she still suffered every day in a mind that would never recover. Deep breath in. Let it out. Another breath, half release, hold. The crosshairs didn't waver. Rock steady just like Uncle Ricky taught me. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against my shoulder. Through the scope I saw the bullet hit. Jimmy's lower body exploded. Blood and bone sprayed across the deck, painting the wall behind him. His legs buckled instantly, collapsed beneath him like they'd been cut away. He fell, not like a man who'd been shot, like a marionette with its strings severed. No control, no resistance, just a sudden, total collapse. Then the screaming started. I watched through the scope as he thrashed on the deck, arms flailing. Head twisting, everything from the waist up still working, still feeling, still aware. But his legs were motionless, dead weight. The bullet had shattered his pelvis and severed his spine. He screamed and screamed and screamed. I thought about getting my phone out, recording it, sending it to anyone who might understand what this meant. But I stopped myself. Too risky. Too much evidence, so I just watched. The screaming went on for maybe 10 minutes, then it started to fade. The blood loss was taking its toll. His movements became weaker, more spastic. His head lolled to one side. Finally, he went still. I waited another full minute, making sure he wasn't playing dead. Then I centered the crosshairs on his face and squeezed the trigger again. The second shot removed most of his skull. I'd collected the brass casings from a shooting range in Jackson. .3006 caliber, not .300 Winchester Magnum. Different gun, different rifling, different everything. A false trail for whoever investigated. I placed the casings carefully near my shooting position, wiped them clean of prints first. Then I collected my own brass and slipped away through the trees. By the time I reached my truck, parked a mile away on a logging road, the sirens were already starting. Someone had heard the shots. I drove back to town, stopped at Millie's for a beer, sat at the bar and watched the news spread through the room like wildfire. Jimmy Cummins is dead. What? How? Somebody shot him. On his own deck, 2 shots. Sweet Jesus, who would do something like that? I finished my beer, ordered another. Listened to the speculation, the shock, the barely concealed fear. 4 down, but I wasn't done yet. The investigation was everything I'd hoped for. State police descended on Crockett County within hours. FBI showed up 2 days later. Media trucks lined the streets of the county seat, reporters doing stand-ups about the assassination-style killing of a law enforcement officer. Sheriff Cummins held press conferences, demanded answers, promised justice for his murdered son, but he couldn't provide any leads because there weren't any. The investigators found my shooting position, found the fake .3006 casings, traced them to a batch that had been manufactured years ago and distributed to sporting goods stores across 3 states. Dead end. They interviewed everyone in the county. Nobody knew anything. Nobody had seen anything. The redneck mechanic at Buck's garage was questioned along with everyone else, but my cover story held up. Just another drifter lying low, minding his own business. After 2 weeks, the investigation stalled. The 3 accidents were re-examined, but nothing connected them to Jimmy's murder. Different causes, different circumstances, no apparent link. Just bad luck, the investigators concluded. Just coincidence. I'd gotten away with it, but there was still work to do. The blackmail files. Jasper's grandmother had told me about them months ago. The leverage that kept the Cummins family in power. Decades of dirt on every white person of consequence in the county, plus a few state and federal officials. As long as those files existed, someone could use them. The sheriff's widow, a relative, a political ally who knew where they were hidden. The system would survive even if its leaders didn't. I had to destroy them. The sheriff's house was the obvious location, not the county offices where too many people had access, not a bank vault where records would exist. His home where he could keep them close and secure. I watched the house for a week, learning the patterns. The sheriff and his wife were rarely home at the same time these days. She spent most of her time with relatives, grieving. He worked long hours trying to find his son's killer. On a Tuesday evening, both of them left for a church service honoring Jimmy's memory. The house would be empty for at least 2 hours. I went in through the back door. The safe was exactly where I expected it. Home office, behind a painting of some Confederate general, old model, probably dating back to the sheriff's father or grandfather. Heavy steel combination lock, not fireproof. I didn't need to open it. I just needed to destroy what was inside. The gasoline took 15 minutes to spread. Living room, kitchen, hallways. I soaked every piece of furniture, every curtain, every rug. When I reached the office, I punched holes in the drywall around the safe and poured gasoline directly onto the steel. Then I laid a trail of gasoline-soaked rags out the back door, lit a match, and walked away. The house went up like a torch. By the time the volunteer fire department arrived, the structure was fully engulfed. They couldn't even get close enough to attempt a rescue, just stood there and watched it burn. Total loss. Everything inside reduced to ash. Including, I hoped, whatever evidence of the Cummins family's decades of corruption had been hidden in that safe. I was planning to leave. The job was done. Jimmy dead. His accomplices dead. The blackmail files destroyed. Crockett County's reign of terror finally, irreversibly ended. Time to get out while I was ahead. Then I saw what the sheriff did to Jasper's grandmother. I was driving through the black part of town when it happened. The sheriff's cruiser parked behind an old sedan, blue lights flashing, and there was Mrs. Williams standing on the sidewalk while the sheriff screamed in her face. I pulled over, watched. She'd stopped briefly to let a friend load groceries into her trunk, not blocking traffic, not causing any obstruction. Just being a good neighbor, the sheriff didn't care. What the hell do you think you're doing? You think you can just stop wherever you want, think the rules don't apply to you? I'm sorry, Sheriff, I was just helping. Shut up. Give me your license and registration. But I wasn't. Now, he wrote her a ticket, threatened to have her car impounded. Made her leave before her friend had finished loading the groceries, just because he could. Just because he wanted to remind the black residents of Crockett County that he was still in charge, even with his son dead, even with his house burned down, even with everything falling apart around him. Still the same petty tyrant, still abusing his power, still treating people like dirt. Something shifted in my chest. The cold calculation that had carried me through 4 killings gave way to something hotter, something angrier. I'd been planning to let the sheriff live. Let him suffer the loss of his son, his home, his legacy. Let him spend his remaining years watching everything he'd built crumble into dust. But watching him bully that old woman, I realized something. Suffering wasn't enough. He needed to die. The sheriff and his wife had moved into Jimmy's house after the fire. She was almost always there. No opportunity for the kind of long-range shot I'd used on Jimmy, but the sheriff had to drive home every night and the route took him along some remote stretches of road. One curve in particular caught my attention. Sharp bend along a steep hillside. No guardrail, the road served mostly black neighborhoods, so the county had never bothered to install safety features. A car going off the edge would tumble 50 feet down to a rocky stream bed, fatal almost certainly. I waited on a side road for nearly 2 weeks before the opportunity came. Thursday evening, just after sunset, the sheriff's cruiser heading home alone. I pulled out behind him. Followed at a distance, waited for the curve. Then I accelerated. The impact was precise. Rear driver's side bumper just enough angle to break the back end loose. The sheriff's cruiser spun, caught the soft shoulder, went over the edge. I watched it tumble down the hillside, rolling twice before coming to rest upside down against a boulder. Glass shattering, metal screaming, then silence. I pulled over, got out, made my way down the slope. The car was destroyed, crumpled like a beer can. But through the shattered driver's window I could see movement. The sheriff was alive. Airbag and seatbelt had saved him, temporarily. I reached the car, crouched down to look through the window. He was hanging upside down, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. Dazed but conscious. His eyes focused on me, widened with recognition. You're that mechanic. Evening, Sheriff. Help me, call 911, I'm trapped. Not going to happen. His eyes changed, fear creeping in through the confusion. What do you want? Justice. I crouched lower, making sure he could see my face clearly. Your son pulled my niece over on a county road. Handed her off to 3 of his friends. They beat her, raped her, destroyed her mind. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do, you gave the order. Damaged but not dead. Those were your words. His face went pale. How do you? I had cameras in her car, recorded everything. Your son's phone call, the whole thing. Oh God, those 3 accidents your friends had, me, the shots that killed Jimmy, me, and now. I stood up, looked at the gasoline dripping from the ruptured fuel tank, pooling on the rocks beneath the car. Now I'm going to finish what I started. The sheriff's eyes went to the gasoline, then back to me. Wait, the damage to your truck, the paint transfer, they'll match it. They'll know you did this. I pulled a book of matches from my pocket. They would, if the evidence wasn't about to burn. No, please, I'll give you anything, money, information, whatever you want. Can you give me back my niece's mind? Can you undo what your people did to her? That's what I thought. I lit the match, dropped it into the pool of gasoline. The flames caught instantly, raced toward the car. The sheriff screamed as the fire reached him, a sound that echoed off the hillside and disappeared into the night sky. I walked back up the slope, got in my truck, drove away. Behind me, the gas tank exploded. The screaming stopped. I stayed in Crockett County for another 6 months, maintained my cover, went to work at Buck's garage. drank beer at Millie's, listened to the gossip about the sheriff's accident, about the ongoing investigation that went nowhere, about the changes sweeping through the county now that the Cummins dynasty had ended. When I finally left, I told Buck that my past had caught up with me. The husband of that woman in Jackson had found out where I was hiding. Time to move on, he understood. Shook my hand, wished me luck. I drove the truck back to Alabama, took it straight to a friend's junkyard and watched them crush it into a cube of scrap metal. Whatever paint transfer evidence might have existed disappeared into a smelter somewhere. No connection to me, no trail to follow, no evidence that Michael Orr had ever set foot in Crockett County, Mississippi. The changes came faster than I expected. I'd made 2 anonymous donations before leaving, one to a voter registration nonprofit specifically earmarked for Crockett County, another to a PAC supporting black candidates for county office. My own money, not a penny from Natalie's trust. The next election was a landslide. Every black candidate won: county commissioner, sheriff, clerk, judge. The first black majority government in Crockett County's history. The new sheriff's first act was to clean house. Every deputy who'd served under the old regime was either fired or reassigned. The department's entire culture was rebuilt from the ground up. The new commissioners reallocated the county budget. Roads in black neighborhoods got repaired. Schools got funding. Services that had been denied for generations finally arrived. It wasn't perfect. Some of the new officials made mistakes. Some of the initiatives were poorly planned. But they were trying, actually trying to serve all the people they'd been elected to represent. Equal rights had finally come to Crockett County, not through the courts, not through federal intervention, through something darker. Something I'm not proud of, but it worked. Natalie will never recover. The doctors confirmed it months ago. The damage to her brain is permanent. She'll live the rest of her life with the mind of an 8-year-old, dependent on others for care, unable to do the brilliant work she was born to do. Matt and Rachel are still with her. They've become more than caretakers now. They're her friends. Her family, they play games with her, take her for walks, make her laugh. They love her genuinely and completely. I pay them well. Set up retirement funds. Left them the farm in my will on the condition that they care for Natalie until she's gone. The business goes to my employees. They've earned it. Everything else dies with me. I made a decision somewhere along the way. I won't marry. Won't have children. Won't build a family that might someday discover what their husband and father did in Crockett County. I got away with 5 murders, but I'm not naive enough to think that will last forever. Someday, somehow, the truth might come out. A deathbed confession. A piece of evidence overlooked. Some connection that a clever investigator finally puts together. When that day comes, I don't want anyone else to pay the price. So I live alone, work the farm, run the business, visit Natalie when I can, which isn't as often as I'd like. She doesn't always recognize me anymore, but she always smiles when I walk through the door. That smile is worth everything. I sleep well at night. That probably surprises you. 5 people dead by my hand, and I sleep like a baby. No nightmares, no guilt, no cold sweats in the dark. I won't pretend that's normal. It's not. Most people would be haunted by what I've done. Would lie awake wondering if they'd become monsters. But the army taught me to compartmentalize, to do what needs doing and then put it away. To separate the person who pulls the trigger from the person who lives the rest of their life. Those 5 people deserved what happened to them. They were predators, monsters, men who destroyed lives for power and pleasure and petty spite. The world is better without them. I don't regret what I did, not for a moment. But there's a cost. There's always a cost. Confucius said it best. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. I've dug my grave, not a literal one, but my bloodline ends with Natalie and me. No children to carry on the family name. No grandchildren to remember us when we're gone. The Orr family, such as it was, dies when we do. I guess that's what happens to the second grave Confucius recommended.